Connect multiple devices simultaneously. Internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber. Connect multiple devices simultaneously. Internet like a boss. SLT Mobitel Fiber.
Tomex. Fellam sa විසබීජ අවම කර දින 3ක් දක්වා ටොයිලට් එක ෆ්‍රෙෂ්ව තමයි. Tomex.
Tonight, did it work? The GMOA strike suspended, says it's done in festive spirit, but the health minister digs his heels in. Not all is our fault. Expert points to global ripple effects as part of Sri Lanka's economic woes.
The long-term way out, export expansion and foreign investment.
Future is bright. Merchandise exports crossed the $1 billion mark for the 5th consecutive month.
There is a rising world demand for rubber-related products. We are recording one of the highest values in relation to tea, rubber, coconut and other export agriculture products in the history in 2021.
Back on track. The central bank sees favourable developments in workers' remittances in December. Extends additional incentive for dollars. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Friday, the 24th of December, 2021.
Nelly, මතකෙන් ගිලිහුණු black shiny කෙස් කලඹක රහස Sunsilk Black Shine සමගින්.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, welcome to First at 9. I'm Thamma Kekanai. Now then, the island-wide strike launched by the Government Medical Officers Association was temporarily called off today. They say that it was done in festive spirit, but threatened to kickstart the strike if a favourable response is not received from the Health Ministry come the 3rd of January. With other medical trade unions also criticising the conduct of the GMOA, the Health Ministry is adamant that he will not be backing down.
The island-wide strike conducted by the Government Medical Officers Association was underway for the 4th consecutive day today. However, at 4 in the evening, they temporarily called off the strike, citing the need of the festive season.
නමුත් ලබන වසරේ ජනවාරි 3 වෙනිදා රැස්වීමට නියමිත මධ්‍යම කාරක සභාව මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් යහපත් ප්‍රතිචාරයක් ඒ කාලය තුල ලබා දීමට නොහැකි වුවහොත් මෙම වෘත්තීය සමිති ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය තව දුරටත් තීව්‍ර කරමින් ලබන වසරේ ආරම්භයේ සිට නැවතත් ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීමට නියමිතයි.
In any case, the Minister of Health is adamant not to back down, insisting that the due process has been followed when making post-internship appointments, which is at the heart of the GMOA strike.
පශ්චාත් සීමාවක වෛද්‍යවරුන්ගේ පත්වීම් ලබා දීම රාජ්‍ය සේවා කොමිෂන් සභාව සහ ආයතන අධ්‍යක්ෂක ජනරල්වරයාගේ චක්‍රලේඛන මෙන්ම ආයතන සංග්‍රහ අනුව සිදු කිරීමට බොහොම පැහැදිලිව කියන්න ඕනේ මේ වෙනකොට 524ක් පත්වීම් ලබා දෙන්න තිබ්බා. ඒ 24 දෙනෙක් විවිධ හේතුන් නිසා ඔවුන් එක්ක රට යනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් පෞද්ගලික අංශයේ සේවය කරන්න තමන්ගේ හැකියාවක් තියෙනවා නම් ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් කටයුතු කරලා තියෙනවා. ඊටු 500 දෙනාට සාධාරණම ක්‍රමවේදයන් අනුගමනය කරලා එයාට පත්වීම් ලබා දීමේ වැඩපිළිවෙලක් ක්‍රියාත්මක කළා. අමාත්‍යවරයා හැටියට මම නම් ඒ ලයිස්ට් එක දැකලත් නැහැ. මට බලන්න උවමනාවකුත් නැහැ. ඉතින් එයා වැඩ බාර අරන් තියෙනවා මේ වෙනකොට. කිසිම කෙනෙක්ගෙන් පැමිණිල්ලක් ඉදිරිපත් වෙලා නැහැයි කියන එකත් කියන්නට ඕනේ. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා ඒ සම්බන්ධව අපේ තියෙන ස්ථාවරයේ අපි වෙනසක් කරන්න සූදානම් නැහැ. මොකද ඒක තමයි සාධාරණම ක්‍රමය. එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ රටේ තියෙන අනිකුත් සියලුම වෘත්තීය සමිතීන් එහෙමනම් අපිට සම්බන්ධ කරගන්න වෙනවා. එහෙමනම් රාජ්‍ය පරිපාලනයක් අවශ්‍ය නැහැ රටකට. විශේෂඥ වෛද්‍යවරුන්ගේ සංගමයේ පැහැදිලිව මට ලියලා එවලා තියෙනවා. මේ ඉල්ලන ඉල්ලීම් සියල්ල අසාධාරණයි. මේකට එකඟ වෙන්න අපි සූදානම් නැහැ.
In the meantime, the conduct of the GMOA came under heavy criticism from several other medical trade unions as well.
වෛද්‍ය නිලධාරීන්ගේ සංගමය විසින් නිත්‍යානුකූල නොවන සංවිධානයක් වශයෙන් ඊයේ අමරටුව දිසාධිකරණයනොත් සිතාසෙනෙකුත් කිරීමට තීන්දුව කරා උසාවිය අපහාසයට ලක් කිරීම පිළිබඳව. එහෙම කරලා තියෙන සංවිධානයක් 4 වෙනි දවසට ඇමතිතුමාගේ පස්සෙන් ඊයේ ගිහිල්ලා කියනවා අනේ ඇමතිතුමනි මොන හරි ලියුම් කැල්ලක් දෙන්න අපිට මේ වැඩවර්ජනය අතහරින්නම් කියලා. දවස් 4ක් වැඩවර්ජනය යෙදෙනකොට දිනකට මිලියන 62ක් වෛද්‍යවරු 20000ක අතිකාල දීමන අහිමි වෙනවා. ඊයේ හවස වෙනකොට වෛද්‍යවරු ඔක්කොම 90ක් විතර වැඩවර්ජනය කරන්නේ නැති තත්වයකට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා.
පත්වීම් ලබා දීමේ අවසාන ලේඛනය කියන එක සකස් වෙන්නේ පුරප්පාඩු ලැයිස්තුව සකස් කරාට පස්සේ ඉල්ලපු අයගේ මනාපය සහ කුසලතාවය මත තෝරා ගන්න ක්‍රමවේදය. ඒක කවුරුත් එකගතාවයට පත් වෙන්න ඕන දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. මේගොල්ලෝ බලාපොරොත්තු වෙලා තියෙනවා මේකෙදි යම් බලපෑම් කරලා ඒගොල්ලෝ ඒ පුරප්පාඩු එකතු කරන්න, තව පුරප්පාඩු ලේඛනයේ තිබ්බේව නැතිව එක්ක දාන්න. හරි මොන හරි ප්‍රශ්න ටිකක් ඇති වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒක මේක දේශපාලන මැදිහත් වීමක් ලෙසින් හොවා දක්වමින් මේ ජනතාවගේ අනුකම්පාව දිනා ගැනීමේ බොහොම පහත් විදිහේ වැඩපිළිවෙලක් තමයි මේ අරන් යන්නේ.
නියම ක්වලිටියට හැදෙන අලුත් ටියාරා රස පදමට අලුත් වෙලා.
Former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardene, is critical of the central bank's money printing ever since it was first established, saying it does more harm than good. Speaking to Indivari Amwatha on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, he stressed that money supply should be allowed to grow simultaneously with the real economic growth, and veering away from this will mean the perpetuation of the present economic state of the island.
Remedy do you think Sri Lanka has for the remittances issue? They've found alternative routes to get into the country, and thereby there is another crisis that Sri Lanka has to manage.
That is a part of the crisis, not a separate one. Now the senders, those who are working abroad, they observe it. So we call something called speculations. They speculate that if they send dollars through the formal channels, that may affect their assets, and therefore they immediately try to find informal ways. So what they do, they give money to their agents in the country where they live, and then they give a phone call to Sri Lankan agent, they give rupees. So there are no dollars coming in, only the rupees are coming in, and that may also aggravate the inflation further, because when the people have money, they start spending, so that goes to the demand pull inflation. So that may actually, so this what you said actually is a part of the dollar crisis. They immediately see that there's a bad situation coming up, and therefore they go for their speculation.
If we turn to talk about the dollar rupee situation, the understanding is that this is not a situation created just within these past 2 years, but due to inconsistent policies or the kind of policies that were implemented throughout the history of independent Sri Lanka. But is it possible for us to go there now when everything seems to be falling apart?
The inconsistency in the policy that you are talking about has been the overprinting of money by the central bank throughout the post-independent history, ever since central bank was set up in 1950. If you allow the money supply of the country to grow at the same rate as the real economic growth, you don't have this problem. But if the money supply has been increased simply because you want to meet the government financial requirements, there is an excess money available, and that excess money would, in an open economy, would go out of the country by imports and purchase of various other products from other countries. So Sri Lanka had this particular problem since 1950, and if you examine the period of the past governments, the inconsistency in the policies that all the finance ministers at the time they present the budget in parliament, they promised the parliament that they will not get money from these expansionary sources from commercial banks and the central bank. But at the end of the year, if you sit back and examine what they have done, is they have exactly done what they had promised not to do. Exchange rate is under pressure for depreciation because there is a huge gap in the balance of payments. This gap has been financed in the past by successive governments by borrowing money from outside, which has given birth to another problem called the foreign debt problem. And when both the gap and the foreign debt problem get compounded, then we have no other escape except allowing the exchange rate to depreciate in the market. But the government has been holding on to this magic 203 rupees per US dollar without any facility or availability within the central bank to supply dollars to the market to maintain it at that level. So as a result, there's a shortage of dollars in the market. This shortage has created a huge and lucrative black market outside the banking sector. If you take the official exchange rate of 203 rupees per US dollar and the black market rate at 240 to 250 rupees per US dollar, premium is as high as now 40 to 50 rupees. So what it means is that the black market is thriving. The central bank cannot control it unless the central bank allows the exchange rate to move downward so that you will be gradually eliminating the black market. Pretty soon, the central bank will have to allow the rupee to fall. When you allow the rupee to fall, it will be a free fall, and at that point, we don't know what would happen to Sri Lanka's economy.
Meanwhile, Professor Ranasinghe went on to say that not all problems the country is facing are the result of bad policies, but are brought on due to bad governance.
After 77, now we have nearly 50 years, very close to 50 years. Even now, the industrialist seeks the government incentives, various packages for them to survive. Other than very few large-scale entrepreneurs, all others are heavily relying on the government quotas. When we give the chance to the private sector over a nearly 50 years' time to compete in the market, still we are not competing. We are not strong enough to compete. We understand the world trends, but at least we should be able to little better than this. So my reading of this is that just the import substitution or the export-oriented policies are not to blame. We have very bad governance system of the country and also very inconsistent monetary and fiscal policies. Those policies have discouraged, and also our competitors like Vietnam, Thailand, even Bangladesh, they win over the race. They were able to attract our investors there, so we lost it, and therefore we are in sort of a very, this foreign reserve problem we start seeing from 1970s gradually is going down.
Now then, Christmas is a time of joy and festivity. But this year's festive season comes with a pinch, especially to the wallets. First at 9's Andrew Bernard brings you this report.
Hello, COVID nisayla business එක අඩු.
මිනිස්සු අතේ සල්ලිත් නැහනේ. බඩුවක් ගන්න අඩ ගැව්වත් කියනවා සල්ලි කොහෙන්ද කියලා බඩු ගන්න.
ලොක්ඩවුන් එකක් ඉඳලා තමයි මිනිස්සු මේ තත්ත්වයට දැන් ඇවිල්ලා ඉන්නේ.
ගාන වැඩි. නමුත් ඉතින් අපිට ගන්න වෙනවනේ. රත්තර සමරන්න වෙනවනේ.
අපි 150 200 තිබිච්ච ලයිට් බල්බ් මේ කොහමද ගන්නෙ? නත්තල අර කරන්න ඕනින්ද කරනවා මිසක් මේ ළමයිට පෙන්නන්න ඕනේ නත්තලක් තියනවා කියලා.
පොඩි අයගේ ආසාවට අපි දෙයක් කරන් දෙන්න මිසක් හරි අමාරුයි. මිනිස්සුන්ට දරන්න බැරි ගානක් තියෙන්නේ.
2020 was nothing compared to this year. The third wave of COVID-19 that wreaked havoc across the country caused an immense loss of life and an economic downturn that's second to none. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. Dwindling forex reserves and extreme inflation rates have put the country in quite a tangle. Part of the problems consist of challenges brought on by the COVID pandemic, while inconsistent policy decisions spanning over decades have contributed to the rest. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka placed the country's headline inflation at 11.1% in the month of November from 8.3% in October. To top things off, with the prices of commodities on the rise, the levels of unemployment have also been similarly high. COVID is a chief contributor to that. In the month of September, the country's unemployment rate had risen to 5.7% from 5.2% in April earlier this year. But this isn't all.
Given the shortage of foreign exchange, we are having import controls, we are having foreign exchange restrictions. In fact, we have a commodity shortage in the country, causing the commodity prices to go up. Our exchange rate has depreciated so much. It's likely to depreciate in the future unless we try to control it. And we have other factors affecting the local commodity shortage. Because of the import restrictions, we also have problem of getting inputs, both intermediate and capital goods, which are needed for our production. So when the oil prices go up, when the input prices go up, and when there is a shortage of inputs that we need from the world market, obviously our production sector is getting paralyzed. Apart from that, we have some other policy issues. The fertilizer issue, the removal of the administrative prices, and the increase in the oil prices, and all these things have an impact on our local commodity prices. Obviously, going into the market prices and removing administrative prices, this is a good thing because the government cannot keep controlling these prices too long, because then in that case the taxpayers have to bear the additional cost. So it's a good move, but the timing is wrong. We are adopting these policy options because the government cannot continue to rely on administrative price controls and subsidies.
But Sri Lanka isn't alone in this. Many of the world's developed countries such as the United Kingdom, the United States, Singapore and many others have seen record levels of inflation. UK's November inflation jumped to 5.1% from 4.2% in October. That's a 10-year high. Inflation in the United States was at its highest in November at 6.2%. That's a 40-year high in the world's largest economy. And the policies adopted by bigger economies to tackle their own economic woes are having a ripple effect across the globe. And Sri Lanka isn't spared.
This is the period of economic recovery in the global economy, and when the economic recovery is taking place, usually there is an increased aggregate demand causing inflationary pressure. So that we have observed this in most of the countries in the world, including rich countries such as the United States. But the macroeconomic policies in this kind of situation should be directed at increasing the interest rates and containing the money supply. However, some of the countries are not interested in doing that. The reason is they want to wait and see because they want to allow the economic recovery even with slight increase in prices. So they are approaching the issue with some caution. This has a global impact all over the other countries, including Sri Lanka.
In about 2.5 months' time, the world will cross the unwanted milepost of enduring 2 whole years under the cloud of the COVID pandemic. Whether the world could have done more in a collective sense to eradicate this is a separate question. Those are strictly ifs and buts. But as the present reality is concerned, living with COVID and managing the challenges it may throw from time to time is the new normal. So how should Sri Lanka adjust its course to navigate these new waters?
The long-term way out from this inflationary pressure and the subdued economic activity, it depends on 2 things: export expansion and foreign investment. Without these 2 things, there is no long-term recovery of the Sri Lankan economy.
We'll see you shortly after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, Sri Lanka's merchandise exports crossed the $1 billion mark for the 5th consecutive month in November and is expected to exceed the $12 billion mark for the year. Total export earnings for the year at the end of November is at $13.8 billion, not far behind the year's revised target of $15.72 billion.
As per the data released by the Sri Lanka Customs, Sri Lanka's merchandise exports have increased by 55.11% to $1.2 billion in November this year compared to November last year. According to Chairman of the Export Development Board, Suresh Timel, the growth in exports was not only due to the effective prevention and control of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also due to the commitment of exporter community to support the national economy by bringing in the much-needed foreign currency. Sector-wise, the export earnings from apparel and textile have increased by 52.8% year-on-year to $496.4 million in November, with strong performance in exports of apparel and woven fabrics. As for earnings from rubber and rubber-finished goods, there have been an increase of 46.9% to $102.2 million in November 2021 year-on-year. It's the result of a strong performance in industrial and surgical gloves exports and pneumatic and retreated rubber tires and tubes. Under the coconut-based products, export earnings from kernel products, fiber products and shell products increased by 45.5%, 30.5% and 42.9% respectively last month compared to November 2020. Further, export earnings from coconut oil was up by 37.24%, dissected coconut increased by 72.78%, coconut milk powder jumped by 52.07%, coconut cream by 79.5%, while liquid coconut milk went up by 19.41%. Being the largest contributor to the coconut-based sector, cocoa peat, fiber pith and molded products which are categorized under the coconut fiber products increased by 42.4% to $16.7 million in November this year compared to November 2020. In the meantime, export earnings from tea increased by 7.6% to $1,213.75 million during the period of January to November 2021 compared with the corresponding period of 2020.
There is a rising world demand for the rubber-related products. So we're fortunate in one side that we capture the market again and we are producing more because historically tea, rubber and coconut are the ones that the country had been provided with vital foreign revenue by those 3 exports actually. So it's coming back to that potential again. So we are recording one of the highest values in relation to tea, rubber, coconut and other export agriculture products in the history in 2021.
Meanwhile, export earnings from the electrical and electronics components increased by 43.53% to $36.47 million in November 2021 on a year-on-year basis. The export earnings from seafood also increased in November, up by 233.43% to $34.91 million compared to the corresponding month in last year. This is due to the increase in earnings from export of frozen fish, shrimps and prawns, fresh fish or chilled and other edible fish. Meanwhile, during the same period, Sri Lanka has recorded $11.1 billion worth of revenue from merchandise exports. In the meantime, the estimated value of services exports for the period of January to November 2021 was $2,710.92 million, increasing 27.6% over the corresponding period of last year. The revised export target of the Export Development Board for 2021 is to achieve $15.72 billion, which include $12.14 billion from merchandise exports and $3.58 billion from services exports.
Now then, the central bank says that it has observed favourable developments in workers' remittances so far during December. As a decision has been made to continue the additional incentive of 10 rupees per US dollar until the 31st of January next year. It added that requests made by Sri Lankans working abroad were also considered when making the decision. The additional incentive of 10 rupees per US dollar is granted when workers' remittances are channeled through licensed banks and other formal channels and converted into Sri Lankan rupees. Further, CBSL has also decided to bear the transaction cost incurred by Sri Lankans working abroad up to a defined limit when remitting their money to Sri Lanka through exchange houses or banks. The all-share price index crossed the 12,000 mark for the first time in its history today, ending at 12,070.68. Now here's a brief report on today's market performance.
Today, the market continued its uptrend for the third consecutive day from midweek, setting a new record of surpassing 12,000 for the first time in the history on the pre-Christmas day. The market activities dropped by nearly 50% to 25,500 compared to yesterday, since the market opened only until 12:30 p.m. due to the half-day Christmas holiday. As investors kept away from the market following a holiday season, market recorded a 2.5-month low turnover of 2.8 billion rupee, led by a joint contribution of 35% from insurance sector and capital goods sector.
Now, Archbishop Brian Udaigwe, the Apostolic Nuncio to Sri Lanka, calls on all those who celebrate the birth of Christ to share with those in need during this festive season. With that, this is our special Christmas segment, Message of Hope.
Jesus Christ brought peace and preached peace to the world, and we try to imitate him, especially during this season of Christmas, by trying to be the messengers of peace. By doing this, we practice forgiveness and reconciliation. In his message for the World Day of Peace, Pope Francis said that there are three main paths to peace: dialogue, better investment in education, and job creation. This is what I wish in his name to Sri Lanka to have and practice these three. During Christmas, we practice love, charity in a special way. Jesus taught us this. We practice it always in our lives. It is a time of sharing, putting in practice the charity that Jesus Christ taught us. A time of sharing with those in need, with the poor, with the lonely, with the sick. And this is more important at this time. Permit me to use this occasion to wish that this beloved country continues to be the pearl of the East. I wish all Sri Lankans a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. God bless you.
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.